Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Dynamics Fortnite Fridays.
Where we cover everything Dynamics, great and small. So it is fall, and we just had Ignite, so there's a ton of announcements on Ignite. But before we do that, I have, and I suppose you do, have a seasonal topical joke for me, a dad joke. You got anything today, Bart?
Got to start it off right. Go
Okay,
for it.
yep.
Go for it.
Okay. So this is a bad one, but I found it just really liked it. What do you call it? It's topical. In the United States, we have Thanksgiving where you have turkey and cranberries and potatoes, mashed potatoes. All this stuff is traditional meal, right? But what do you call a sad cranberry?
You got me.
A blueberry. Okay, I mean, that would tickle me, right? So okay,
That's good.
all right,
That's good.
all
That's
right,
good.
all right. So what do you got for me, Bart?
Mine's what's every bad bowler's favorite holiday?
Bad bowler's favorite holiday. Strike, a spare, split.
It's Turkey Day, of course.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So,
see? Yeah.
so a turkey was it like a
Three-
7-10
Three strikes
split?
in a row.
3 strikes. Okay,
Three
yep.
strikes in a row is a turkey.
I don't bowl, so yeah. Okay.
I don't much, but I did
Yeah.
pick that one up at one point. I think I got one turkey in my life. Anyway.
Okay. But you know what? It's like, that's going to catch on along like some of our bowling contingent of our viewers. But hopefully our content is way better than our jokes today, once again, Bart. So what do you got for me?
I need some blueberries. All right. As we get started, the first one is a generally available announcement that if you have been using cloud flows with Power Pages, you're now supported. Do it in production. And that's really all I need to say. The biggest new enhancement that came out with it is you can contextualize the flow with all the properties of what was going on the page to make that a little bit easier to work with. Whoa, that wasn't what I meant to click on. Let's just minimize instead of trying to click behind. The next one is if you work with Power Virtual Agents, now called Copilot Studio, by the way, that you can now create multilingual chatbots in a supported way. And we've given you all the ways to kind of put the supported languages in and all the translations that you decide you want to put in. Localizations is all here for how to do it. Take advantage of that if you need your bots to be multilingual. Or model-driven apps, we've had this capability called the monthly channel instead of the semi-annual channel so that you can get more regular updates to your model-driven app infrastructure than just twice a year. And that has always been an environment level setting. Well, we are now changing that. And we're going to keep it at an environment level, but also give you the ability to say, well, the environment might not have to have that, but I want this app to be monthly release instead of having to have the entire environment or not, turned on or not. And it gets even further fine-grained in that we don't even have to do it for the full app. We can do it just for certain users. And so you can have the app be monthly channel, but certain users are laggards, and so you want them to be semi-annual, or you could go the other way around. So we're giving you a lot more control over whether you want the control over that to be at the user level, the app level, or the environment level. And we are going to start defaulting the kind of non-choice of where you just say, when you're configuring it, I'm not going to make any overrides, and I'm going to say I want this to be in the auto channel. Right now, the auto channel is semi-annual. In about January, that's going to flip, and that's going to start being monthly in terms of if you left it alone and let it be auto. But you can still go define it if you would like. So pay attention to that if it matters for how you use model-driven apps. For the Canvas controls, we've had updates regularly over the past few shows. There are a few more updates in here. The biggest one is that several controls have gone generally available in that modern Fluent UI space. So watch for that. Watch for some theming enhancements to be continuing on all of these controls. So lots of good stuff coming for the app makers in terms of getting more and more fluent on those Canvas controls. Managed environments have had a lot of investment in this show, so I'll continue to highlight some of them. One of them is, if you use managed environments, we are now going to allow you to set up the per user Power App license with autoclaim. So managed environments just need to be in use. You don't have to only apply this to managed environments. So there are some things that you can do when setting up in the admin center, these policies for the Microsoft admin center. And then if you come down to the Power Platform admin center, you can decide once you've got that turned on and it's in use, because you have some environments that are managed inside of your tenant, you can then say, well, I want this auto claim capability to work across every environment, not just the managed ones. So that what it basically does is it says, if some user in my organization tries to use an app that needs premium licensing, I'm going to just let them automatically claim one of my unused per user licenses that's in my tenant by trying to use that app, and it'll just assign it to them and go without you having to do anything. You still have the ability to do it with group-based licensing or individually assigned licensing. You got all that other control still, but this auto claim would be for everybody who didn't get taken care of by one of those other rules. So nice enhancement, make licensing easier. Unfortunately, it's only the per user app type. Who knows what that's going to change into as things continue to mature. That one was the one that autoclaim worked best for. If you are in a managed environment, there's also a new capability that for those environments, any app that gets created, Auto or Copilot will generate the description of that app by actually interrogating the code that makes that app come to life. And then it'll automatically summarize what is going on in that app and make that the description, so that users don't have to try to do it. And to be honest, like most users don't ever put a description in there of their app. They just name it and they leave that description blank. And it's really kind of hard to tell by the way some things get named. So this is really nice that it's going to just automatically generate it. And if you choose to use this new grid view of the listing of your apps instead of just a list view of those apps, that it makes those descriptions easily kind of readable because of the card way of displaying things on that new grid view. So nice enhancement there to try to make app discoverability, I guess, a little easier. If you haven't been paying attention, the Center of Excellence kit, and you are a manager of the Center of Excellence team, make sure and update to the latest version. Note the November updates are out, so take advantage of that. And the Power Automate desktop client has also received November updates, so go ahead and do the updates on those. Unfortunately, the documentation hasn't come out on all the updates that got put into that, so I'm guessing by the next show that documentation will be out and I'll be able to update you in terms of what those are. Here's that announcement I kind of mentioned earlier. Power Virtual Agent is now part of the Copilot Studio. It's the biggest part of Copilot Studio, but only a part of it. Copilot Studio is going to be a bigger suite of tools. It's just this is the biggest piece. So essentially what we have done is said, well, it got announced a few months ago that Power Virtual Agents would be able to fine tune and let you put some additional controls and ability to get at some of your own data for Copilots in Power Platform. Well, we're now expanding that and saying this is now going to be the way to fine tune and bring your own data into Copilots in general in the Microsoft ecosystem. So instead of it just being a Power Platform thing, it's now going to become a way to customize Copilots across the board. So that's really the big announcement. There's going to be tons and tons of detail around that are sort of talked about at Ignite and will continue to evolve over coming weeks, months, and probably years. That's a huge thing that we have just done. In Power Automate, Copilot has now been added. So we've had Copilot in Cloud Flows. We recently had announced Copilot in Process Mining, and now Copilot is fully featured in Power Automate Desktop as well. So that's kind of the big news. Use Copilot for making new steps and thinking about little widgets of scripts that you might need to use within your Power Automate Desktop capabilities. So lots and lots of good stuff. The other thing that Copilot is now doing across a lot of the Power Automate capabilities, both Cloud Flow and Desktop Flow, is to look at the runs of each of them. And you can use Copilot to say, well, show me my failed runs, or show me what the major time consumption step is in my flows or whatever. And Copilot can go figure that out and show it to you so that you can then work on those to try to fine tune them and make them better also. So nice stuff in Power Automate. In Power Apps, lots and lots of other good things coming here. So Copilot used to be a control you had to go add specifically to a Canvas app if you wanted it to be there. We're now going to allow Copilot to just kind of be there for model-driven apps and now Canvas apps and just use it. It will automatically find data that is in Dataverse tables if you use the Dataverse connectors in those apps. If you're using other data sources, then you're going to want to use that Copilot Studio to wire up whatever data is important out of those other other data sources as plugins, and or use the connector infrastructure in Copilot Studio to allow that to control your Copilot experience within the app infrastructure to handle whatever data sources you've wired up. So lots of good stuff there. Managed environments. I told you I was going to keep coming back to this as things we're adding more and more capabilities to. For those folks who have to manage all of the governance rules of the environment strategy and the permissions within environments and DLP rules and all that stuff, we've now added for managed environments groups so that you can put 15 environments in a group and say, I'm just going to say that all things apply to the group, and that will apply to every environment within the group. So all those rules get built at the group level and just go down to all of the individual environments that are part of it. So this kind of makes especially developer environments that get grouped with dev, test, and prod environments work exceptionally well now to all have the same rules and all be able to be conjoined with the pipelines capability to push the code between them, making it a much simpler thing to administer. The caveat, though, is you do have to be willing to put the premium licensing in the hands of all the folks who need to use all those managed environments. So there's a little kind of pull and tug there along with how we're building all of that capability. For the mobile experience on all of the Power Apps, we have recently updated the mobile experience, and I guess it's not highlighted right here, but in that mobile experience, it is significantly faster and cleaner and just an updated UI for folks that are using phone and tablet versions of their Power Apps. So yeah, now we're actually seeing the Copilot stuff, and it's not just Copilot to build the app or Copilot to ask about the data, but we're going to have little Copilots on text input boxes so that the end user can just like click on that little box and talk to it, and it'll like, or put a small prompt in and it'll generate whatever text you wanted to put in that box from an end user experience. So really cool stuff with this answer control, and you can do a special little widget that has a specific prompt already in it to kind of prompt the Copilot if you would like to have it, spit out whatever the LLM does when you give it that prompt tied to whatever data you're bringing in. So all sorts of fun stuff. Okay, I think I've already talked about many of these things. Advisor, another new capability with managed environments that has just become at least public preview at this point. Advisor will look across all managed environments and start giving admins all sorts of guidance saying, oh, across all of your managed environments, here are all of the apps that are now orphaned, or here are all of the apps that or all the flows that are no longer functioning that you need to have somebody take a look at, or here are things that you might want to quarantine for various reasons, and just prompts you for all those things. I talked a little bit about how much faster the new mobile experience is. This is the experience down here that talks about it. So look at this blog post. Tons of good information on it around apps. Well, can't leave Dataverse out. Lots of great stuff announced about what Dataverse can do. So Dataverse will allow you to actually create Power Platform plugins, and those plugins can be used in Copilot Studio. That's all now part of the capabilities. There is a prompt builder, because AI Builder relies on Dataverse, that these AI prompts that are something you can create that you can then use in various places in both AI Builder, I believe, and maybe even in Copilot Studio. There's lots of things where this prompt builder might be super useful as well. And that not only organizations, but even kind of ISVs can package some of these things up and put them into their plugins and So can not only just build plugins, but if you already have OpenAI plugins, those are going to be something that you can just use as well. All sorts of crazy stuff. The GPT prompt engine within AI Builder has also become generally available. So you can now use it for real at scale, be supported, all those kind of things. What else we got? Link to Fabric. Also now in full preview. So Link to Fabric basically takes a copy of Dataverse and pushes it into Fabric so that you don't have to worry about any ETL jobs. You don't really even have to configure anything. You just say, I want to link this Dataverse to Fabric. And if you've got a Fabric instance that you can tell it where it should go, all the tables just automatically show up in Fabric. You didn't have to do anything. It's near real time that all that stuff just lives there and it just stays in sync. It's pretty cool. And it puts it in a lakehouse that has a SQL endpoint. So if that data actually got processed and other things happen in that lakehouse and you want to use that SQL endpoint to put that back as a virtual table inside a Dataverse that you use for an app or something else along the way, that all of that's certainly possible as well. So lots of great stuff announced there. And I believe my next post is also, okay, no. So my very next one here is just saying that in your Power App, if you want to call a Dataverse action, that's now generally available. I'm not even going to say any more about it than that. Use it at scale. It's supported. This is now security enhancements for Dataverse have just been announced. So we now have full integration with Purview from the data cataloging perspective. So we can data classify and we can understand what data is in Dataverse. We also have rich integration with Sentinel with a bunch of pre-built scripts in Sentinel to look at all the Dataverse actions that are happening to try to help you find suspicious events that people may be doing transacting in Dataverse. We have put more events in the Microsoft 365 Unified Audit Log. So we had all sorts of things that were already there. The big enhancement is a bunch of administrative things now show up with environment management and things that you might do with DLP rules and all sorts of other stuff is all now there in the Unified Audit Log. And then, of course, I just talked about Link to Fabric. Elastic tables, long-term data retention, all kinds of great stuff is all in here. I think I'm just going to let you read this with the one thing I know Dan's already talked about, but got highlighted here that if you are an F&O customer, Synapse Link for Dataverse is now generally available and that you should try to move to it as quickly as you can, as well as some nice guidance on using Context IQ to surface data that's stored in Dataverse in the context of Teams chats or emails or other places that you're kind of wanting to surface that data really quickly, giving you some guidance on how to use the /mention to just bring up records and have the Context IQ version of that record rendered in line with how you work to communicate. So amazing, cool stuff all over the place. If you are an administrator and governance person for your Power Platform, connectors are one of the things you've got to keep those DLP rules up on. And we're announcing 60 new connectors and 50 connector updates. So pay attention to this. You're probably going to want to update your DLP rules a little bit after looking through all the things that have just been announced for the connector platform. And last but certainly not least, in Power Platform, we also have just introduced the ability to take online payments in Power Pages without having to go build it yourself. It's going to be a native control you can just light up as part of a multi-turn form. As one of those turns, you can say, I want to allow payment. So if that applies to you, that you've wanted to have a checkout payment experience on a Power Page, well, we've just made that a whole lot easier in a pre-built secure way. So take advantage if that applies to you. For most of these other ones, I'm going to comment that they're here and tell you the links are here and let you read up on them yourselves. But there was a really nice summary of all kinds of things that have been announced in the sales experience for the customer engagement finish platform to make sellers way more efficient. A lot of it is Copilot related, but not all of it. Some of it is just changes we have made to the functional pieces of different places that sellers need to work. If you use the mobile offline capability in your phones or tablets when doing field service with Dynamics. We've got 3 different blog posts, part 1, part 2, and part 3, that all are best practices of how to work with that offline functionality to make it the most efficient patterns that you can. Inside of the field service application is now the ability to use guides and to use remote assist included with your licensing, and a co-pilot for each, especially on the guides side, that will allow you to use natural language, just talk. If you're wearing the HoloLens right now, anyway, that's going to be the first way that we're exposing this co-pilot, but you'll just be able to ask it a question. Like, I'm trying to fix something, you can just say, well, what do I need to torque these nuts to? If you're trying to fix something, it'll recognize what you're looking at, go look at some knowledge somewhere, figure out what the torque specs are, and just either put it in your field of view or talk back to you and say, oh, you need to tighten that to 19 newtons or whatever the answer is going to be. So super cool stuff. Copilot for Service is a really interesting offering here. Similar to the way Copilot for Sales worked with both Dynamics 365 Sales and Salesforce, and it was included with Dynamics 365, but you had to pay for it with Salesforce. Copilot for Service works with Dynamics 365 and is included with the Dynamics 365 license, but if you want to use the Copilot for Service with ServiceNow or Salesforce, or I believe Freshdesk was the other one. There are 4 platforms now that Copilot for Service works with, and it does all the kind of summarizing and look at your knowledge base and reply to emails, reply to chats, all that stuff that Copilot for Service is really good at. It's now ubiquitous to talk to many different platforms, not just Dynamics. So super cool. And then Copilot for Field Service is there to help both the dispatch folks and the field service techs with all sorts of great capabilities for summarization and making it much, much easier to keep your field service technicians going to the right jobs at the right time, and all the other stuff that Copilot can be really good at by looking at data, analyzing it, and giving you suggestions. So lots of great stuff out there. I've gone way over. Dan, I'm going to hand it over to you.
You know, this was so much information, right? It's been a great 2 weeks. It's like, but I do have to comment on, like, in the field service copilots. You know, of all the copilots that we've delivered within Dynamics, for me, this one and probably the Projects Ops are the most encompassing, probably the most, probably the easiest to digest and like easiest to get immediate huge value out of those. So it's like, so if you're using field service, make sure you dig into that one, because I just looked at that and thought, oh God, this simplifies so much stuff. And even the guides one, which integrates with the field service, because it's like putting together assets and looking at, you know, reference material and stuff and trying to find that and sending that up in the guides was doable, but it was tedious work, and that just makes it so easy. So yeah, I'm kind of giddy about that, right? So I'm going to share
all of those go across the Dataverse stack and everything in the supply chain stack, all in the way it looks at its data without you having to do anything else. So.
Exactly. So it just simplifies everything. I mean, we've been making things easier for the last since we went on Azure in the cloud, and now we've just accelerated. So yeah, it's good to be part of the Microsoft universe. I think it's going to be So okay, let me shut that down. Okay. All right. Okay, I'll get rid of that. Okay, that was user error, folks. So I got quite a bit to cover, so we're going to go way over. So you might want to be able to put this on pause and finish up the if you have other meetings. But let's go into human resources. So as you recall, I've been talking about for the last year, like we reintegrated as a standalone human resources as a siloed configurable component and put it back into the finance and supply chain, or often called the finance and operations system. So we're starting to add some more features into this. And so 10.0.38, we've added some, set primary position for the hire. So if you prelim put this, put like a hire in, we'll have a job and then that position for that job. So we can set one as default. So it's a little thing, but it keeps you from doing some of the tedious work. But more importantly, we've actually added some in feature enhancements and stuff to go back with the leave of absence. So first of all, in 10.0.39, you're going to configure multiple leave types. So it's like you might have a leave type for FMLA, or just take a sabbatical, or some sort of sick leave or something like that. And so you can have multiple leave types on a single plan. So it's like a single type of employee can actually take maybe a sabbatical, or a medical leave, or FMLA leave on those. So that's going to be there, and you can actually configure the leave units, like how much you actually can accrue, whether it be by day or by hour on that. And you can also say this is an open-ended leave. We don't know when you're going to be back. So if Dan was like, I'm injured, we don't know what's going to be back. We're going to keep that open-ended. So those features, and just be aware that on 10.0.39, it's automatically going to be updated, and it can't be disabled. So not a ton on human resources. Hopefully they get a lot more features in the future, now that they've kind of stabilized and got everything standardized within the F&O platform. Business Central, a lot of updates this time. And so I'm going to try to make a synopsis of this. So first of all, if we go into the platform, this one we have more control over the Power BI embedded reports. Before it was just kind of a view, depends upon your screen size, it wouldn't readjust, but now we can actually, stretch the view, zoom in those, look at scorecards and things on top of that. So again, it's just a whole lot more easier, user-friendly components into this. Also, we've consolidated the Power Automated flows across Business Central templates. What this allows you to do is, like, you can put on the pages that it supports, and the workflows that it supports, you can have it automatically on the background flows. It can be an instant, or you can actually just do a manual flow, but it'll execute those Power Automate flows. I'll mention this is like Business Central virtual tables are going to be supported fully within the Microsoft Dataverse. I kind of foreshadowed that on like a few shows ago, but those are super important because you can do CRUD operations within those virtual tables within a model-driven app, or a Canvas app within the Power App. So that just makes it a whole lot easier to work with, right? And then
I'm a big fan of those.
Yeah, it's like it made my life a whole lot easier, right? It's just they're simple to work with, right?
And the performance has gotten way better, and they're still making huge investments to continue to make performance get better and better and better on those. So
yeah, and it's like you're kind of foreshadowing on some of the performance stuff that we're improving upon too later in my talk track here.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah, so another one is like there's a lot of stuff on the Power Pages. It's like the virtual tables. There's also things like viewing companies across multiple companies using the connectors. So you can actually have different installations of it. You'll have a connector between those different companies, and you can use that. And then so you can use Power Automate across those. And then later in this, I'll be talking a little bit about, or I won't talk, I'll just tell you that in the application, we can do intercompany transactions across the BC or the Business Central environments. And this way you can actually have intercompany general journals that allow for the eliminations, right? So if you're selling intercompany, you have to allow the eliminations, because if you sell to a different company and you roll it up, you're not doing the sale twice. That actually doesn't count, right? So those type of things are taken in consideration, and it does the consolidation. So that's a big step forward in taking Business Central toward more of an enterprise application instead of a smaller mid-market for that. So I looked at those as kind of like big starts. There's business events, which I mentioned. It's like, so you can actually trigger something that happens off the business event to say, hey, I'm going to send a notification to my customer, or the cash balance is so low, so I need to send a notification to the bank, or something like that, right? There's also been some modifications or improvements in the CE sales sync, right? So for CE sales enterprise, syncing that data back and forth, because it's like they're two different platforms, two different systems. There's also a simplified Power Automate experience, so we can actually automatically set with that within the environments, like automatically when you're creating that Power Automate. The requester and the approver emails are sent easier to go by. It's like request by is actually going to fit automatically in that email. You can use those, and it's like, if you cancel that request, it'll send back to the approver and things like that. And then we can also post to the Teams channel or to specific users on that. So it's like just the experience is a whole lot better. Also, one thing that I want to mention is, you can trigger bulk updates. So if you trigger bulk updates into the system, it used to be up to 100 different tables. Now it's up to 1,000 different tables. So it's a tenfold or a magnitude difference in those within Business Central. So huge improvements in that. In the application, I mentioned there's some navigation that's easier between the documents, the intercompany I mentioned already. There's also some reversing documents to a customer or vendor ledger. So for the realized gain and loss. So for instance, like if you sell between two different countries with two different currencies, there's going to be a gain or loss depending on the time period with that. And so you'll actually post that realized gain or loss. Well, when you reverse entry, so if you cancel like an order, you actually have to reverse that gain and loss entry as well. So it takes that in consideration. It's a small thing, but it's a piddly, really mundane task that accountants have to do if the system doesn't do it for you. So there's also one thing that I thought it was kind of neat. It was just like you have directed pick using the basic warehouse configuration. So you can just set it like a simple location. You don't have to have location directors or wave picking or anything like that. You can just use the simple WMS or warehouse management configuration for that, and it'll send you on directed pick of where you need to do something. So you don't want to over engineer, if you will, your warehouse. It's got to be simple, but you still want some guidance into that. So that's a small feature which is going to make a big deal to some of our customers that have that moderate size warehouse that they don't necessarily need a full advanced WMS configuration. And with that, we also have inventory availability within the warehouse application. So you can see, you have 10 in stock, but maybe 3 are allocated already. So you only have 7 available. So those are taken into consideration. You also can have different GL accounts for AR and AP for vendor accounts customers. So the default into is like, okay, this is an accounts receivable for this type of customer. This is an AP for customers. But now we can say it's like, okay, for this type of transaction set, we can send it to like a bad debt or something like that. Also, there's been some, you can print barcodes, both, single D and 2D, barcodes. Before we had to use a third-party package like a Barten or something like that. And again, we did that about 2 years ago in F&O. Now it's available in Business Central. Let's kind of go down to some of the co-pilots. It's like we've talked about some of these. I'll be talking about this next co-pilot next month. In countries, basically, is Chechnya is now available, and there's been some updates. In the dev components, we've done some stuff for, Excel reports to be able to have multiple data sets in an Excel worksheet. That allows you to have a parent-child relationship in the data sets and be able to analyze that a whole lot easier across the board. There's some AL extensions within Linux. There's some syntax highlighting in DevOps. You can actually see the syntax, so it's becoming more of a first-party language. And there's another one in here that I thought was pretty interesting. So I'm going to pass down this. It is the syntax, or let's see, the it is the selling Business Central through AppSource. Before we'd list them on AppSource, but if you wanted to manage their license and do their sales, you'd have to rely on a third-party publisher, do it yourself. And now it's like we do, and you'd have to contact that publisher directly through AppSource. Now we manage that all through AppSource. So it just simplifies all those applications, and there's tens of thousands of them within Business Central there. And so our partners are going to be very happy about that. On governance, it's like basically, retain permissions when enabling cloud migrations. So this one is for GP migrations. So the old Great Plains or GP, which was on premises, there isn't a cloud version of GP. So it's like our recommendations go to Business Central. And for that, it's going to actually retain those permissions for those GP users as we migrate them across to the cloud. There's been some legislation components on that, basically getting more information about the effective permissions and what do they have available. On legislation, drop shipments for triangular intrastate trade. Now, what this really means is, within a country, it's like especially in the EU, isn't considered inter-country or like a inter-country transaction if it's within the EU. So you don't have to report those for your intrastat reports. So basically, it says it's like if you're going from Germany to France, that's within the EU. You don't have to report those in your intrastat. But if you actually go from Germany to the US, you actually have to report those type of things. So just makes that simple. There's some components for e-documents as core as the global solution that includes an e-invoicing for large companies that report the payments. That's for the Swedish. They have a special report for that. And you can pre-configure the data that's going across that. So on onboarding, there's some demo data that's available to you for service that is pre-configured for that demo data. There's some components for initial sign-ins, like so how we actually going to prompt them and make that easier for them to get in as they go for their first single sign-in. For data analysis, oh, this is kind of nice. It's like you're able to analyze and group and pivot data from queries right within Business Central, which I thought this is really nice because I find pivot tables really valuable within Excel. And of course, you have some pivoting capability. It just kind of native. It's even just so cool within Power BI. But now we can actually do this within Business Central. So I thought that was pretty innovative of that team to put that in there. Now you can actually share data analysis with a coworker and send that link across to them and analyze those groups on that list. So a couple components under that. But there's been some service platform improvements with some faster rendering. There's been some extension performance. So if you're doing like partner extensions, we're making sure that's more performance. And you can actually sync on those multiple companies within the Dataverse. It's like all those different the units. I was talking about that multi-company components. We can actually sync that within the Dataverse as well. For the user experience, just a couple things. It's like I'm able to search on any data within the mobile app within the system. You can search for data anywhere within Business Central that's contextual, just not within that screen or that field. And you can find related records on those lookups. So again, just really some nice stuff within Business Central. Oftentimes, I don't spend a lot of time in Business Central on that, but I thought this was definitely worthwhile for your Business Central users to know, especially for you administrators of large companies that may have multiple instances of different ERPs. Business Central is really a strong contender for those small distributed locations. So let's go to what's new in platform updates. So in the platform updates, there's just one thing that's kind of really interesting. So it's like bulk editing for the grid. And this is, so you can, on the grid, we enabled probably about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, to be able to edit right within that grid. So you can actually just, instead of going in the record itself, you can actually just go into edit mode within the grid and update those available fields within that. But you couldn't do things as like, okay, we have all of these different items and we want to change the terms, right? Or all these customers want to change the terms in bulk. And before there was a utility within the old Exapta, we took that away. So you could export it to Excel and then bring it back in. We're now allowing this within finance and supply chain. So this is kind of a nice thing. So you can actually go into select the rows that you want, select the columns that you want to update within those rows, and provide that new value within that, and then it'll validate that update. So it might be tens of thousands of different records possibly that you do. So again, that's just kind of a nice feature into that. So let's look at let's see. Oh, configuring business performance analytics. This is the business performance analytics. If you haven't used this, is kind of the new iteration of the Power BI reporting or our reporting. And this is really nice because it allows you a granular, more granular way to actually set security, and it just has more flexibility, just more performant than the native Power BI reports. So it's like we always keep on improving what we have. And so this goes into like how to set these up. So it goes from the admin, the set up the roles, the configure, and the Power Platform Admin Center, right? Now this isn't, there's some stuff that you still have to set up on the configuration within F&O or finance and supply chain, within finance, right? But it kind of leads you through that because we're bringing more of an integrated environment. So this is the Power Platform Admin Center. It talks about configuring the AD tenants. It talks about putting things in the maintenance mode within the finance and supply chain that you actually put in the maintenance mode. Then you go to configure this within the license configuration and turn on configuration row versions. So that's kind of a nuanced little thing that you have to go through. Then go back and install the apps through the Power Platform, through those virtual entities and stuff like that. So kind of goes in detail, but it's the next iteration of our reporting. Just makes things more powerful and easier. And again, that more of that consolidation within the two platforms. So two more things to talk about. So in finance, within update 38, 10.0.38. So first of all, is the cash and bank management, net customer and vendor balance. So I was never super happy with the way we did this within the old Exapta days. We didn't really do an AR AP netting. So if your customer is also a vendor or vendor is also a customer, we just want to actually kind of net those out to see how much they owe us or how much do we owe them, as a vendor customer relationship. And so we did this thing with, payment journals and receipt journals on that. Now we just have netting journals, so we're doing it the proper way. So that's a big deal. And now there's a second thing is there's a better way to settle bank statements within that. So we settle directly from the bank statements, and you can turn on to generate those payments directly from those matching on those bank payments. There's also generate a nacha, which is North American or is it the national accepted National Automatic Clearinghouse payment files. This is actually a standardized bank payment, okay? But now it generates those electronic reporting to those bank statements I've been talking about for the last couple of years. This is generally a European thing. Now we're seeing this in the U.S. So stay tuned as this kind of progresses to the U.S. doing electronic reporting, electronic settlements out of that. And I talked a little bit about Business Central for posting currency gains and losses. So on 36, we did this for different, for the debits and credits. So it's like, if we had a different currency for the debit versus the credit on that, we actually did that across. But now we're doing it across for the accounting currency too. So they might be 3 different currencies on that. And so we're reconciling those losses and gains for that foreign currency loss and gain on that. There's some tax integration with the project transactions. So this allows, for those hours, expenses, fees, or items across that, to actually post with that tax service, which has always been native with sales and purchasing. Now it's of course with the project ops and the project transactions for those operation journals. It also works with quotes and integration journals. We've also have some enhancements within the GL, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the credit and collections and analytics performance. So that wasn't super performant. And now we actually have faster rendering, as you kind of mentioned earlier. We've done a lot of stuff there, Bart, with that. And the last thing on my list today is improved performance, which I kind of foreshadowed with the financial dimensions. So we've just done a lot of things with this because, while it's a great idea, think about the permutations you can have with different dimensions and different combinations of those dimensions. It's like for you math people, the factorial thing. So we have to do all these calculations for an income statement or a balance sheet onto that. It can take a huge amount of processing power and end up getting really slow. So first we introduce tags to actually simplify that, so you don't have to use financial dimensions, and so we can still get the reporting out of that. But we're also doing things to make it performant across the board. So we're adding 3 new fields to actually simplify this, but we're going to remove 22 and 10.0.42. So this is important. So if you've done some customizations or extensions, within that, you need to go in and look at this and validate this. These 22 fields are going to be removed. Now, that's not transactional data that you're going to be removing, but these are made for processing and posting things as you go through. So just be forewarned that in sometime next year, 10.0.42 is going to come out, and those are going to be deprecated. So look at that for your financial dimensions. So yeah, we had a ton of stuff this week, Bart.
It was a big week of news.
Yeah, it was
2 weeks actually, but most of it was this week.
Yeah. All right, so you want to talk about some updates?
There's a ton of them. Just know that they're there. Take a look through them. Lots of stuff has had updates in the platform, and of course some links. And Dan even added one at the bottom with the release schedule for F&O. So I think we ought to call that a wrap and see everybody in a couple of weeks.
All right, see you in a fortnight, folks.